Welcome to my Biden versus Trump summer prediction. So let's start. And there we go. So as you can see, the first one that stands out is Oregon. So first of all, for Oregon, I think that it just barely drops off from the safe margin threshold into what will be similar to 2016. I think it drops off due to the national environment from like 16 points to barely below 12. And yeah, so for other states, let's go talk about, Colorado. So Colorado, in this scenario between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, I think not much happens, but the main question in Colorado is by how much it drops. And I think it will drop from 2020, of course. I think if you can see what's happening in the national environment and the economy, I think there's a big chance we have a recession. So I think it drops down from 13% to, give or take, 7 to 9%. I think it's still going to be a big state for the Democrats, so no problem here. So for the other states, let's go talk about Texas and Florida. So both of these states would be pretty good states for Donald Trump in 2024. I think that Texas would have a decent chance of going by anywhere from, you could say 8 to 10%, but you could even make a case for 9 to even 11%, something like 2016 sort of levels, but even more due to the economy and that sort of stuff. While Florida, it's almost a given by this point that it's going to vote by a likely margin. Whether it's Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis, it's going to vote to the right of 2020. And I see Donald Trump winning Florida by, in this scenario, anywhere from either 6 to 8%. I'm probably gonna say like 6 or 7%. I think that's really about it for the state. And yeah, for the following states, let's go talk about Ohio. Ohio and Iowa. As you can see, I already have Iowa colored in as a safe state because I see the GOP having more room to grow in this state. I think it could very well just become a safe state in the future, and I do expect it to at the moment. But for Ohio, I think it's going to be harder for the GOP to get to that safe margin threshold, but I think it's going to be way more difficult for the GOP to get to that safe margin threshold, even in the economic recession. Ohio barely misses out on being a safe state. I think it's going to be around 11.5%. And yeah, and for North Carolina, not much to say here about this state, but it was real close in 2020, barely a lean state for the Republicans. And I think, as you heard me talk about, I just don't see a way that the Democrats do better than what they did in 2020. I think it's going to be even worse for them in 2024. I expect the state to go for Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis by a likely margin. It's just barely above that 5% threshold for it to become a likely state. And I see it as a likely state in this scenario. So I think that's, let me see. Before I forget, for the state of Virginia, I think we are getting to that spot where the state could drop down to a lean state. And that could very well happen, in my opinion. But I think that Donald Trump is really not the right candidate for this state. I think his coalition doesn't do as well as what other Republicans could. I think Ron DeSantis would probably do way better in Virginia, but I think it drops down really kind of like from 2020 around 10% to 2016 where it's barely a 5% state and a likely state for the Democrats. And I see Virginia as a likely state for the Democrats by around 5 to 7%. And yeah. And as you can see, after the likely states and the safe states, Donald Trump has 235 against Joe Biden with 204. And now for the lean states and more toss-ups, you could say. For the first one, let's just talk about Arizona. I think Arizona, it wouldn't go by a likely margin, but if it's Harris versus, I wouldn't even be surprised, to be honest. Arizona, I think in 2024, you would see it go back. I think Joe Biden would not be able to get the coalition that he was able to in 2020. I think, if I had to guess, I would say that Arizona goes to the GOP by a margin of 2 to 4%. I think that's pretty reasonable and a decent win for him in this state. And let's go to the other states. So as I was saying, for the state of Minnesota, I think Minnesota, if you look at the state, it could very well go back to 2016 levels. But the thing is that Minnesota is such a hard state, sorry about that, for the GOP to really gain momentum in. And I think that Donald Trump, he does of course do better than 2020, but I still see Minnesota going to Joe Biden and the Democrats by a lean margin, I think. If I had to guess, I would say 2 to 4%, but if the recession is really bad, I could see it, or just mildly bad, I could see the state going by Joe Biden by only 1 to 3%. And for other states, let's go talk about, Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin is about time I talk about Wisconsin. So as many of you know, like, Wisconsin is one of the most, you could say, states that did trend a lot to the right with Donald Trump. It's really one of those old school Obama-Trump states that really was a surprise to many back in 2016. And in 2024, if I had to guess how they vote, they're easily gonna vote by a lean margin. As of now, I think the Republicans are in a decent spot to win Wisconsin in the next election. And I see Donald Trump winning the state. Maybe like the opposite of Minnesota. I could see Wisconsin going for Donald Trump by 2 to 4%, but I'm leaning towards 1 to 3% as of now. So, yeah. And briefly, I think, I'm gonna talk about Maine at large. So, as many of you know and noticed, I actually just put the Maine's 2nd district outright as safe. And the reason for that is because the turnout you would see in a Biden versus Trump scenario would benefit Donald Trump quite a lot. And Maine at large drops from a 9% win for Joe Biden, in my opinion, to a lean margin. I'm going to guess Joe Biden still wins Maine at large, of course. I think the recession and the economy would not be as bad as 2008, but I still see him dropping quite a lot in many states, and this would be one of them, I think. Maine at large, 1 to 3%. And for one of my favorite states to look out for, let's talk about New Mexico. So New Mexico was that Gore-Bush state, and then Obama came in not long after and just won it by insane margins because of the Hispanic vote. But as many of you know, in politics, the Democrats have been failing with the Hispanic vote, and it's getting closer and closer, and the GOP is just taking advantage of this opportunity. And if I had to guess by how much the Democrats win New Mexico, it's going to be less than 5%, I think. I'm going to guess Joe Biden still wins the state, of course, against Donald Trump. It is way closer, but New Mexico leans state, and I see Joe Biden winning it by 2 to 4%. I think 2024 is just simply not looking good for the Democrats. And for the other states, let's talk about for the lean state of Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania is a must-win state for Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And the reason for that is because it has 20 electoral votes. It is quite a decent chunk. And if you see from 2016 to 2020, it was a Trump-Biden state. And I see Trump winning the state of Pennsylvania in 2024 by even bigger margins than 2016. I think the turnout and the low approval rating by Joe Biden is really horrible. And I just don't see him making it up come November 2024. And Donald Trump does in fact win the state of Pennsylvania by a lean margin. I think Trump wins it by either 1% to 3%. I think that we could be surprised by how much Pennsylvania votes to the right of 2020, I think. And yeah, so as you can see, we have not that many states left. So I think let's go. And yeah, so let's start off for Nevada. Nevada's an easy state to call out, I think. No matter what happens, it's going to vote to the right to the right of 2020 and 2016. And with the current momentum within the Republican Party, even with Donald Trump, I think Nevada does in fact vote for the GOP in 2024. I see Donald Trump winning here by, I would say 0.5% to 0.75%. And yeah, so for another state, so Michigan, of course, I do think it's going to be harder for Donald Trump to win the state, especially by margins similar to what I have for Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. I think it's going to be a lot like 2016 where votes to the left of both those Rust Belt states. But either way, I still see Michigan going for Donald Trump by a tilt margin of around 0.75%. And moving on to New Hampshire, Georgia, and the 2nd District of Nebraska. Starting off for the 2nd District of Nebraska, I think Donald Trump does have a decent chance of winning it, barely, but I think he barely does in fact misses out on it. I think Joe Biden does in fact get the approval of the 2nd District of Nebraska, and he actually wins it by a tilt margin. I'm not too sure the margin for this race or this district, but I could see it either being a low tilt or a high tilt, so I'm just gonna put it as 0.5% win for Joe Biden. And let's go to Georgia. So Georgia is one of those states that in 2016, sorry, I meant to say 2020, I have a bit of a cold, so I'm trying my best. So for 2020, as many of you know, Georgia barely went for Joe Biden in a big surprise, probably the biggest surprise of the election. And in 2024, I just don't see the Democrats getting the turnout they were able to get in 2020. I do think it's going to be harder for the GOP to win here, but at the moment, I think Donald Trump does in fact win the state by a tilt margin in this election. It could also be a lean state, but for now, I think it's a high tilt win for Donald Trump by 0.75%. And lastly, for New Hampshire, yeah. So I have New Hampshire. Personally, I have it as a true toss-up. I'm not too sure about this state. I find this state by far the hardest to call in this election. I think that it is more swingy. I think it could very well go for Joe Biden or Donald Trump, but it's going to be a close race. I think I'm barely going to give it to Donald Trump. I think a tight one for him in this state. I just don't see Biden getting the numbers and the turnout. And with the economic recession looking like it will happen either at the end of this year or in 2023, I just don't see it being a good year and election for the Democrats in 2024. And as you can see, Donald Trump wins with 316 electoral votes against Joe Biden's 222 electoral votes. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next video.